Too broke to borrow money, huh? No way. Get out of here. When I tried to withdraw $20,000 at the bank counter, a familiar figure emerged from the back. It was my high school classmate, Wilson. He was blatantly arrogant, crossing his arms. Sorry, but the bank can't lend money to self-employed folks like you. Now, go on, get out. When I went to the bank with my daughter Emily to withdraw some money, we ended up waiting for hours, only to be told this. Just as my anger was about to reach its peak, my daughter Emily, standing next to me, whispered in a small voice, "Shall we withdraw the $133 million we have deposited and shut this place down?" Ahaha, your daughter seems to have a sense of humor. And then we proceeded with the withdrawal process in the VIP room. Kevin's face at that moment was shockingly pale. My name is George Johnson, a 60-year-old man who used to run a foundry. Although they've become rare these days, a while ago, small foundries were a common sight in the downtown area. By the way, foundry work involves melting metals like iron and copper and pouring them into molds to create items like kettles, iron pots, vases, and skillets. Even the bells rung on New Year's Eve are a kind of foundry product. Foundry, a craft handed down for generations in America. I inherited the factory that my grandfather and father had run, and have maintained it to this day. Now, I've handed over the factory to a certain company and worked there occasionally, while living a relaxed life in a small studio apartment. I live alone now, but that doesn't mean I'm unmarried. Originally, I got married in my 20s and was living a happy life. My wife's name was Susan. She was a woman I met at a mixer that a friend worried about me. A guy who spent his days sweating in a foundry with no chance to meet women had invited me to after high school. Back then, I was overwhelmed with the unfamiliar work at the factory and had no spare time. Susan, too, was just starting her career after graduating from university. We started going out for meals, thinking it would be a break from work. I remember Susan laughing and saying she felt the same way. Honestly, you weren't exactly my type, but you weren't so bad that I'd say no. I didn't have a reason to refuse, so I kept meeting you. You say that, but you actually liked my face, didn't you? Haha, maybe. Who knows? She would always deflect a conversation like that. Was she really into my looks? I still harbor that hope even now. Anyway, fate is a strange thing. Our first date was at a diner. Strangely enough, just a few hours together had me convinced that she was the one I'd spend my future with. I secured a promise for our next date on that very day. By the way, I was living with my parents at the time, so I didn't struggle with living expenses, but my salary wasn't particularly high. Because of that, our dates were always at the local diner. Nowadays, with restaurants that offer bottomless drink promo, it's easy to hang out for hours. But back then, there weren't such conveniences. We would sit for hours with just a simple meal and a glass of juice or some coffee. Probably a real nuisance to the place. I'm still on a low salary, but no one can beat the love I have for you. I'll work hard to make her happy. So would you marry me? As I approached my late 20s, I proposed to her on a whim. If you want, I'll switch to a better paying job. I'm still in my 20s, so I think there are places that would hire me. I started working as a future successor at the factory that my grandfather and father had maintained, driven by the thought that I must not let it die out. Ever since I was young, I was told that I would be the successor, so it seemed like a natural path for me. But reality wasn't so sweet. My high school classmates were advancing in their careers and buying their own homes. Meanwhile, I was still living with my parents, feeling left behind. But Susan's response was entirely different from what I had imagined. Foundry work might be declining now, but if you keep at it steadily, the trend will change. I have a feeling about it. That texture, strength, durability, and the flexibility to be shaped into anything, those qualities aren't common. It's just a misconception that its uses are limited. I think it's much more than that. I do believe it's a traditional industry that should be passed down to future generations. But in the end, foundry work is just that. It's being edged out by the mass production of plastic products. I can't see much of a future in it. At that time, I didn't quite grasp what she was trying to say. Looking back now, she probably had a visionary and creative perspective. However, at that time, There were hardly any environments where women could continue working while raising children after marriage. Therefore, when Susan got pregnant, she quit her job and became a full-time homemaker. And then, we were blessed with a daughter. It was around the time I took over the presidency of the foundry from my father, who had succeeded my late grandfather but was in failing health. The business was in terrible shape when I took over. Every day was a trial and error in taking care of our newborn daughter. But somehow, during that time seemed to move incredibly slowly. Our daughter's name, born at this time, was Emily. From a young age, she showed a remarkable artistic sense. By the time she was 3, she was drawing pictures that rivaled those of adults, honing her skills to the point of winning awards in local art contests. Could she be a prodigy? You know, like those kids you often see on TV. Really, who does she take after? Our family isn't exactly artistic, it's strange. Susan said this happily while playing with Emily. At least, I had no artistic talent whatsoever. My drawings of cats could be mistaken for elephants or rhinos. On the other hand, Susan was skillful with her hands, making clothes and bags as a hobby. She was modest, but it was clear she had inherited her talents from her mother. The happiest times in life might have been those 5 years, peaceful, spent with Susan and Emily. I'm feeling a bit tired. I'm going to bed early tonight. One day, when Emily was 5, Susan went to bed earlier than usual, which was uncommon for her. But the fatigue didn't go away the next day. In fact, she had been feeling tired frequently for the past 6 months. We rushed to the hospital, where she immediately underwent thorough examinations. The results revealed her health was in a poor state. After a battle with her illness, she passed away 6 months later. After saying goodbye to Susan, memories from our first meeting to the present flashed through my mind like a whirlwind. I realized tears were streaming down my cheeks. But Emily, who was 5 at the time, shuddered but didn't cry. Mom left me with many things, so I'll take care of them. So, it's okay. What kind of things? I can't quite explain it, but it's here. Emily, like her mother, had a rich sense of emotion. Maybe there's a connection with her mother that I can't see. It seems it will take more time for my grief to heal. But at the same time, I decided to look forward to Emily's future. That became my purpose in life after losing Susan. When our life as just the two of us began, Emily, with her small frame, started to cook. Of course, cooking with fire was off limits. Because of these restrictions, Emily kept innovating and improved rapidly. Dad, tonight's dinner is thus. I stir-fried vegetables and pork. Did you use the stove? No, I just spread cabbage, king oyster mushrooms, and pea sprouts in a heat-resistant dish, put the pork on top, and microwaved it. The seasoning was just sesame oil, salt, pepper, and soy sauce. The vegetables were torn by hand, so it wasn't dangerous at all. At this time, Emily wasn't even 10 years old yet. Kids her age were playing without a care about what's for dinner. Yet, Emily seemed to live thinking deeply, concerned about me. She might be doing it unconsciously, but maybe she's trying to protect me. But in reality, it's me who should be protecting her. I'm sorry, Emily. I've been relying too much on convenience store meals. I'll make more of an effort to cook. So, you should go out and play with your friends. It's okay. Mom taught me a lot about cooking. If I don't cook, Mom would be sad. Next time, I'm going to make meat and potatoes in the rice cooker, so buy a pack of pre-cut potatoes and carrots. Emily, even as a baby, always wanted to cook when playing house. Perhaps sensing her innate talent, Susan had taught her some simple cooking techniques before she passed away. They were dishes that could be easily made using a microwave or rice cooker, but she knew more recipes than I had imagined. Maybe it was a secret pact between mother and daughter. I decided to rely on Emily for dinner. However, as a single father, it was tough to work as I had before while raising young Emily. There's a limit to how much I could rely on my elderly parents. Despite my dwindling bank account, I decided to hire more staff. Although it meant less money for me, it greatly increased the time I could spend with Emily. I'm not sure how much I've been able to do as a father, but Emily grew up to be a capable girl. I had assumed she would pursue a career in cooking, but it turned out she aspired to be a designer. Emily was good at her studies, but her desired path was a vocational school. My dream is to design pots, dishes, and cooking utensils that make cooking fun. I understand that going to university is an option, but I think it's a shortcut to learn the skills directly related to my dream while I can. Maybe it's because she lost her mother at a young age, but she seemed to be in a hurry to live her life. I started working right after high school graduation, right? Lately, I've often thought I should have gone to college. Why don't you at least take the college entrance exam so you won't regret it later? During my school days, I hated studying. I had no desire to learn anything at college. Mostly, I was concerned about our family's financial situation and chose to work immediately after high school graduation. I can't say I never envied my classmates who went to university. That's why I wanted Emily to enjoy campus life like everyone else. That's your bad habit, Dad. You need to believe more in the path you've chosen. Success or failure isn't about whether you have a college degree or a high school diploma. I feel like I can see the path I should take, as if I'm being guided there somehow. I can't really explain it well. Saying this, Emily smiled shyly. I had no reason to hold her back. Being in the art club, she had often won top prizes in student art competitions. Her grades were also excellent, and she was accepted into a vocational school as a full scholarship student. In that sense, she was definitely a dutiful daughter who didn't cause any financial worry. As for my foundry, it was still barely managing, but a significant change occurred around the time she started her vocational school. A French man suddenly came, wanting to learn the art of foundry work. I saw a foundry exhibit in France and was captivated by its beauty. The luster emitted by foundry work is entirely different from French ceramics. It has a subtle shine that blends into everyday life without being overbearing. It's tactile, considering the user, and has an aura that evokes history and tradition. I want to expand the possibilities of this foundry work to France and the world. This passionate speech came from Louis. Louis was an elite Frenchman in his late 20s. After graduating from the economics department of a university, he had worked at a major investment firm. His job involved investing funds raised from investors into companies and projects. He frequently encountered American antiques as part of his investment work and felt a future potential in foundry work, particularly. Unable to stay put, he left his company and contacted me. The reason he chose me was simply because he had seen my foundry featured on a local internet news site. Why not just invest in antiques for investment purposes? Why quit your job to work here? I hate to say it, but being a foundry craftsman isn't profitable at all. That's exactly why I'm here. Many people don't realize the value and potential of foundry work. However, I believe it should be spread worldwide. But I shouldn't make grand statements without being able to do anything myself. So, please teach me the art of foundry, as I'm eager to learn thoroughly. Louis's English, learned at a university in his home country, was far from fluent. Yet, I was moved by his passion and conviction to leave an investment company and work in the US to learn foundry techniques, a commitment I could hardly imagine. So, I decided to take a gamble and accepted Louis, the Frenchman, as an apprentice. I thought he would quickly give up and run back to France. However, Louis was more committed to this path than I had imagined. He worked tirelessly to master the craft, and within a year, he had become quite adept at foundry work. Seeing his progress made me happy, but as a father, I started to worry about something. I noticed that Louis and Emily were often engaged in friendly conversation. In my prejudiced view, Frenchmen were flirtatious womanizers who greeted women with pickup lines. Moreover, Louis was strikingly handsome. I began to fear that Emily's eagerness to return home straight after vocational school was because she was infatuated with Louis. Today, too, they are deeply engrossed in conversation. Could Louis be confessing his feelings? Amidst these circumstances, I spent my days restless and unsettled. I was almost expecting them to announce their marriage at any moment. However, no such happy news came, and 3 years later, Louis returned to his country. He mentioned starting a business using his foundry skills, but the details were unclear. As for Emily, she graduated from her vocational school with excellent grades and started working as a designer at a company that deals with household items. I suspect that Emily might have confessed her feelings to Louis and got turned down. Though I felt sorry for Emily, I couldn't help but feel relieved, assuming this outcome. As a designer, Emily gained some recognition and started being entrusted with significant projects. She often couldn't come home due to overtime, and wanting to focus on her work, she moved out to live alone in the city. It had been a long time since Susan passed away, and while there were talks of remarriage, I still couldn't forget Susan. Nevertheless, the house built during my grandfather's time was too large for living alone. Being over 50 years old, it was old and cold, which made it difficult to live in. So, I decided to sell the house filled with memories and moved into a small studio apartment. Now, I have turned 60. The foundry was no longer in my hands. It's not bad to spend a quiet retirement, but perhaps because I spent so long feeling the heat of melting iron in a dimly lit factory, or maybe because I gave up many things to raise Emily into adulthood, I suddenly felt the urge to venture out into the world. It's a once-in-a-lifetime journey, Dad. It's a wonderful thing. So, I decided to withdraw $20,000 from my bank account. Don't you use online banking? With that, you don't have to go to a crowded bank counter. You can transfer money with just a tap. I'm not savvy with all this internet stuff. I'm from the analog generation, so the bank counter is my only option. I see. Well, I'll come with you then. You might be a man, but you're in your 60s. It's dangerous to walk around the city with cash. This was how Emily and I ended up going out together after a long time. We had coffee at a cafe and then walked to the nearby bank. Due to the upcoming holiday, the bank was extremely crowded. We had no choice but to prepare for a long wait. As we wandered around not knowing where to get a number ticket, a man approached us. "Welcome. How may I assist you today?" A quick glance at the nameplate on his chest revealed the name Wilson. Seeing that name made my heart skip a beat. I have completely forgotten, but the unpleasant feelings from high school came flooding back. Taking a good look at the bank clerk's face, it was indeed him. He was my high school classmate, Michael Wilson. We were in the same class for all 3 years, due to some twist of fate. Unfortunately, we never had a pleasant conversation. He was known for his high pride and would sulk easily if things didn't go his way. Moreover, he was notorious for looking down on his classmates. His attitude towards me was particularly bad, for a very simple reason. The reason for his attitude was simple. I had announced early on that I wouldn't be going to college and would instead take over the family business. With the sorrow of losing Susan and the business of daily work, I never attended any class reunions. So, it had been about 40 years since I last saw Wilson. Initially, Wilson didn't realize that I was his classmate, George Johnson. "We are quite busy at the moment, so it may take some time. We will call you when it's your turn. Please wait on the sofa over there." Then Johnson handed me a number ticket and a tablet. It was for entering basic information in advance to streamline the process. Being a computer novice, I was no good with tablets either. I slowly filled in the necessary details one by one with Emily's guidance. Wilson came over to check on us, peering over the tablet from behind. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Huh." After seeing the name field, he seemed to have recognized me. His attitude changed abruptly from polite to the arrogant Wilson I knew from high school. "So, it's you, George Johnson, from high school. How have you been living without even going to college? And that shabby factory of yours, I heard it went under." Just moments ago, he was all greetings and smiles, but now he crossed his arms with an air of superiority. It was a terrible attitude for a bank clerk. Emily and I exchanged surprised glances. "What are you going to do with $20,000 all of a sudden?" "No, you've got it wrong. I just need to withdraw some money from my account." "Aren't you supposed to be at the loan desk instead?" "Sorry to say, but this is a major bank. We only deal with large corporate clients. We can't lend a single dime to small-time self-employed people like you." Wilson hadn't changed at all since high school. Wilson's words lacked any shred of compassion. His high pride and self-centered way of thinking were unchanged. There was no hint of a humanly desire to reminisce about the old days with a long-lost classmate. "And you're a single father, right?" "Oh, you poor thing. Your daughter must have had a hard time. They say economic disparity directly affects educational disparity. Looks like it's a high school diploma for 2 generations in your family." Wilson's pitying gaze at Emily was tinged with mockery, not sympathy. And for some reason, after receiving our number ticket, we were made to wait for hours. During this time, Wilson kept coming back to whisper about the hardships of being poor, and then returning to his desk, making sure others couldn't hear him. "Dad, don't you think it's taking unusually long to be called? We've been waiting for over 2 hours since we checked in." "Well, it's crowded, so it can't be helped that we have to wait a bit. But it's strange. Customers who came after us have already been called. Maybe they skipped our number." Looking around, it was just as Emily had said. The elderly lady who sat next to us after we arrived had finished her procedures and left in no time. Even a businessman who came later had disappeared. 3 hours of waiting later, our number still hadn't been called. Our number was 45, but the monitor was currently calling number 70. Even considering some shuffling, it was clear something was amiss. Emily, who had been patiently waiting, seemed to become increasingly agitated. "This is definitely strange. I'm going to ask someone at the bank, but the only one at the reception is Wilson." "It's okay, I'll find someone else." As she was looking around, another bank clerk happened to pass by. She ran up to them, showing the number ticket and explaining the situation. The employee looked puzzled as they checked the number in the monitor, then hurried to a computer in the back. It turned out that our number, 45, was somehow marked as cancelled. There was no way we could have been called. When we were finally directed to a counter, the person waiting there was none other than Wilson. It seemed he had cancelled our number himself and was persistently bothering us. "Too broke to borrow money, huh? No way. Get out of here. I keep telling you, that's not it. I just want to withdraw my own money." With people around, I restrained my anger and responded, "You were always a failure since high school. If you had studied properly and gone to college, you wouldn't be in this situation." Just as Wilson was about to continue with a deep breath, "What a fool you guys are," I was about to loudly tell him to stop. Then, Johnson handed me a number ticket and a tablet. Then, in a voice that was not loud but firm and strong, she whispered something. "Shall I withdraw the $133 million we have deposited and shut this place down?" Wilson looked bewildered by Emily's words, clearly not expecting that such a vast sum could be held by the young woman in front of him. He chuckled dismissively and replied, "Ahaha, your daughter seems to have a good sense of humor. Unfortunately, $133 million isn't an amount that one can easily lay their hands on." "Oh, I get it. Maybe you meant $133 instead." Emily, working commendably as a designer, was being ridiculously belittled. I found myself leaning forward involuntarily. "Just stop it," I was about to say when the bank manager hurriedly came down the stairs, his forehead glistening with sweat. He whispered something urgently to Wilson, sounding like, "What are you doing? How could you say such things?" But Wilson remained nonchalant. These two are trying to forcefully borrow money and saying nonsensical things. At this point, we should sue them for business interference. The branch manager looked stunned. Regaining his senses, he guided us to the VIP room. Wilson, convinced that Emily's claim of $133 million was an utter fabrication, had been smugly circling us. But as we urged them to start the withdrawal process, his face began to change as he realized the gravity of his actions. The head office manager, called in for an emergency, greeted us with the branch manager. They repeatedly begged us to reconsider, pleading, "Please don't go through with this." Wilson's face turned pale as he watched his superiors apologizing earnestly. In fact, Emily had a separate corporate account at this branch, in addition to her personal account. The $133 million was for a project scheduled for next year. Wilson, preoccupied with looking down on others, had failed to learn anything about his customers. He hadn't realized that his bank was conducting significant transactions with Emily and had carelessly made baseless statements. Now, let's reveal how Emily managed to earn such a substantial amount and continue to be a dutiful daughter. After learning the craft of foundry work, Louis returned to France and started his own company. He set up a business selling teapots, kettles, pots, and pans made from foundry work. Louis felt that foundry products, while durable and long-lasting, had a plain appearance that didn't quite fit the modern era. To get people to pick them up, even the best products needed a certain degree of glamour. Thus, Emily, still a vocational school student, was enlisted to explore colorful and pop designs. After much trial and error, She discovered that Foundry's modest chime pairs well with pastel colors. She then came up with cooking utensils in soft pink, blue, green, and yellow. Using the skills passed down from my father and grandfather, I turned her designs into reality. When Lewis's company launched these products not just in France but throughout Europe, they became wildly popular for their cuteness, sparking a major trend. Emily left her longtime job to become a co-owner of Lewis's company. As the exclusive designer, she launched highly successful products globally, and my old, small foundry became overwhelmed with orders from around the world. So, we reinvested all the profits into new facilities and built a large factory in a completely different location. I could have continued as the CEO, but now, as I reach my 60s, with a desire to relax and enjoy life, I transferred the entire business to Lewis's company a year later. The foundry products crafted there soared globally, bringing back $133 million. The sale of the factory easily exceeded hundreds of millions, a portion of which I used to purchase a studio apartment in a high-rise, but most of it went to establishing funds and organizations to support people suffering from the illness that led to Susan's death. Of course, I still donned my work clothes and taught foundry skills at the factory. Despite being busy, as a reward for my hard work, I planned a luxurious solo trip to Europe. The $20,000 was part of the funds for this journey. Yet, Wilson misunderstood, thinking my factory had gone bankrupt and I was penniless. Emily has always been a dutiful daughter, making decisions about cooking, career paths, and jobs in a way that wouldn't burden me. And finally, she has entirely relieved me of any financial worries. Wilson, unaware of the significant influence of the woman in front of him, kept on making snide remarks, inadvertently putting the bank in a difficult position. Seeing the sincere response of the head office and branch managers, I felt a bit sorry for them. It was evident they regularly struggled with Wilson's behavior. Normally, we handle large transactions online, so Mr. Wilson was unaware and acted inappropriately. Regardless, it's outrageous to treat someone based on a 40-year-old image. I can't trust a bank with such an employee. I'll overlook this incident, but I ask for one promise. Please retrain Mr. Wilson to ensure no more victims like me. After making this request to the managers, I calmed Emily and left the bank. What an awful experience. We should have just withdrawn the $133 million. You're too kind-hearted and forgiving, Dad. It's a waste of time and effort to deal with someone like him any further. Besides, he hasn't grown at all in 40 years. I ended up feeling pity for him. By the age of 60, one would think various life experiences would have mellowed a person's character, but Wilson hadn't changed at all. He was a pitiful man, left behind alone. Hey Dad, why don't we visit the grave for the first time in a while? Let's tell Mom about today. She'd probably laugh and ask what's that all about. So, Emily and I decided to visit Susan's grave on a whim. After cleaning up a bit and placing flowers, we stood side by side, hands clasped in prayer. Then, I overheard Emily's words, almost like a soliloquy. Mom, you always believed in Dad's potential at the foundry, and your vision kept me going after you left us. You were right about Dad's lack of confidence in his work, but things have changed. His foundry work, once overlooked, is now a global sensation known for its charm. Thanks to you, I've pursued my passion for design, inspired by your love for crafting and cooking. Your guidance paved the way for my success. That was when I realized for the first time the words Emily had said back then. Mom left me with many things. She was only 5 years old when she said that. Despite her young age, Emily had interpreted and embodied the words left by her mother in her own way. And what about me? Emily believed in the potential of foundry work and accepted our humble life, yet I failed to bring about change. Perhaps I entrusted the future of foundry work to Emily, who had more foresight and initiative than I did. Sorry, Susan. I didn't understand anything. You left us so much in our short married life. As I prayed, tears rolled down my cheeks. Emily was crying too. Through her sobs, she said, Mom, one more thing to report. I'm getting married next month. What? Really? The person I'm marrying is named Louis, a Frenchman who loves foundry work. Back when Louis worked at my factory, he and Emily were truly just friends. But as they discussed foundry design, They realized they shared similar sensibilities and values, and being together just felt natural. Interestingly, it was Louis who made the first move. The notion of Emily being rejected was never true. Honestly, the idea of her with a handsome Frenchman is a bit worrying, but according to Emily, Louis is obsessed with foundry work, claiming it's his true love. Later, I received a direct report from the head office manager about Wilson. His poor behavior had come to light in several instances, and he was sternly reprimanded by the upper management. However, unable to change due to his pride, he eventually left the bank. The traditional path to success in banking involves working at the head office and then becoming a branch manager. Achieving this path in banking could mean a high salary until retirement. However, it's a highly selective process, based on career history, achievements, and abilities, with usually only one or two from each cohort making it. Most bankers are either assigned to subsidiary companies within the group or use their skills and experience to switch careers. But Wilson's pride and self-centered nature hindered him, making neither path viable, yet the bank couldn't just force him out. They were internally troubled about him potentially staying until 65 due to an extended retirement age. I was secretly thanked for the incident, as it turned out to be a relief for them. Since then, I haven't heard anything about what happened to Wilson. Now, my primary concerns are creating foundry work loved worldwide, getting the charity named after Susan up and running, and seeing the face of my grandchild the next year. I am a simple person, unlike Susan and Emily. That's why I want to continue doing what I can, caring for myself and others in a humble way. My second life is filled with hope,